Hey guys, tonight we are traveling back in time and across the globe to a place where money really did grow on, well, not trees, but it was certainly dug out of the ground in staggering amounts. We're heading to the 14th century Mali Empire in West Africa to witness one of the most absurdly lavish displays of wealth in human history. Honestly, if you were dropped into this story, your modern understanding of economics would probably get you laughed out of the city. You might not even survive the first day without accidentally committing a major social faux pas involving a shiny rock. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd also love to see where you're all listening from tonight. So let me know in the comments what city you're in and what time it is for you. It's always a quiet thrill to see how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air that settles on your skin is warm and thick, carrying the scent of dry earth, charcoal smoke from 1,000 cooking fires, and the sweet perfume of ripe mangoes from a nearby market stall. You're standing in what you believe is the heart of the world. Niamey, the capital of the Mali Empire. It's not a city of towering stone castles and paved roads like you might imagine from European stories. Instead, it's a sprawling, organic metropolis of reddish-brown, thatched buildings, their flat roofs creating a stunningly uniform skyline under the vast, blue African sky. The streets are wide, dusty paths, shaded by the occasional ancient baobab tree whose branches look like the gnarled fingers of a sleeping giant. But it's the little details that truly define this place. Look down. The dust at your feet seems to glitter. It's not your imagination. Tiny, almost imperceptible flecks of gold are mixed in with the soil, kicked up by the sandals of passers-by, shimmering for a moment in the relentless sun before settling again. It's nothing, really, bucket lint, the metallic residue of a city that breathes wealth. You watch as a woman haggles over a basket of yams, and when they agree on a price, she doesn't pull out a coin. She empties a small leather pouch from her belt, pours a small pile of shimmering gold dust onto a tiny brass scale held by the merchant, and carefully brushes the excess back into her pouch. This is commerce. It's as normal as breathing. A group of the man's as royal guards passes by, their broad chests covered in deep indigo tunics. They aren't clanking around in full plate armor. It's too hot for that. Their status is shown in a different way. The tips of their spears are not iron, but polished gold. The hilts of the short swords at their belts are wrapped in gold wire. It's functional, but it's also a statement. Here, even the instruments of security are part of the spectacle. You avert your gaze, not out of fear, but out of simple, ingrained respect. This is the central rule of life here, a lesson every child learns before they can properly walk. You can have all the gold dust you want. You can trade it, wear it as fine powder on your skin for ceremonies, or save it for a dowry. But a solid piece of gold, a nugget, that belongs to the Mansa. All nuggets, by law, are the king's property. Historians believe this was a clever way to control the gold supply and maintain the value of gold dust as the primary currency. You once saw a traveler, new to the city, excitedly pick up a small, pea-sized nugget he found by the riverbank. He was immediately, though gently, relieved of it by a guard, who explained the law with a patient smile. The traveler was confused. To him, it was a treasure. To the guard, it was simply a matter of returning lost property to its rightful owner. This river of gold flows from the south, from the legendary mines of Bamboo and Bor. You've never seen them, but the storytellers in the markets sing of deep pits and riverbeds that glitter with a divine light. Caravans arrive weekly, their camels groaning under the weight of the raw, unrefined treasure, which is then processed and distributed, feeding the lifeblood of the empire. This city, this entire empire, is built on a foundation of pure, shimmering gold, and while you stand here, taking it all in as just another Tuesday, you can't help but notice a new energy buzzing through the streets. A rumor passed in whispers between merchants and courtiers. It's a whisper of a journey, a great, Holy journey. Something is about to change. The comfortable, predictable rhythm of your golden world is about to be interrupted. That buzz in the air, that subtle hum of anticipation, leads you inevitably toward its source, the royal palace. You find yourself joining a slow but purposeful current of people moving in the same direction. The palace isn't a single building but a vast, walled compound, a city within the city. The outer walls are high and thick, made of the same reddish-brown packed earth as everything else, but here they are smoother, more imposing. Intricate geometric patterns are carved into the surface near the grand gate, guarded by men who stand utterly still, their golden-tipped spears catching the sun. You enter not into a courtyard, but into a series of them, each one filtering out the public, until only the most important petitioners and officials remain. The air grows quieter. The dust settles. You find a place in the shade of a covered colonnade, looking into the main audience chamber. It's open air, but a massive, domed roof of beaten earth provides shade. Here, the Mansa holds court. You see him now, your king, Mansa Musa. He sits on a raised platform, a simple but large construction draped in rich silk carpets from the Orient. He isn't lounging on a golden throne as a foreign storyteller might imagine. He sits on a sort of divan, propped up by large, embroidered cushions. He is dressed in a simple, voluminous robe of fine white cotton, but the threads shimmer with real gold embroidery at the collar and cuffs. On his head, he wears a golden skull cap, a single, perfectly crafted piece that gleams with a soft, warm light. He holds no scepter, but a short bow, the symbol of his authority, lies across his lap. He is surrounded by attendants, but they keep a respectful distance. One holds a large silk parasol over his head, another a fan of ostrich feathers. At the foot of the platform sits his guide, his oral historian, a man whose mind holds the entire lineage of the empire. Mansa Musa is listening. His head is tilted slightly as a merchant, a man you recognize from the salt trade, speaks in a low, earnest tone. The king doesn't interrupt. He simply absorbs the words, his expression calm and unreadable. This is the source of his power, not just the gold, but this quiet, unshakable authority. He is the Mansa, the king of kings, the master of the trade routes that crisscross the vast Sahara. He controls the flow of gold northward to the Mediterranean and the flow of salt southward into the forest lands. Everything of value passes through his hands. And as you watch him, you remember the stories of how he came to sit on that platform. It was through battle or intrigue. His predecessor, his brother, a man named Abu Bakr II, had a different kind of ambition. He wasn't content to rule the land. He was obsessed with the sea, specifically the great Atlantic Ocean to the west, which the scholars called the Great Green Sea of Darkness. He became convinced that the ocean was not endless, that there must be another shore on the other side. So he funded a massive expedition, 200 ships filled with men, and another 200 filled with gold, water, and provisions to last them for years. He gave them one order: do not return until you have found the end of the ocean, or you have run out of food and water. Months turned into years. Finally, a single ship returned. The captain, haggard and thin, told the king a harrowing story. The ships had sailed for a long time until they came to what looked like a great river in the middle of the ocean, a violent current that swept the other ships away. He didn't know what happened to them. He was the last one, and he had turned back. Abu Bakr listened to the story, but he was deterred. He was inspired. This time, he decided he would lead the expedition himself. He gathered a new, even larger fleet, thousands of ships for men, women, and supplies. He appointed Musa as his regent, to rule in his stead. Then he sailed west, into the horizon, and was never seen again. Now, historians to this day get into very passionate arguments about this story. Did it really happen? The only account we have is the one Mansa Musa himself told to an Egyptian scholar named Al-Umari many years later. During this very journey you are about to embark on. Was it the literal truth? Or was it a convenient political narrative to explain his own legitimate rise to power? Or perhaps it was a grand allegory about the dangers of worldly ambition compared to the righteous path of faith. We will likely never know for sure. What you do know is that your king, Mansa Musa, has no interest in the Western Ocean. He is a devout Muslim, and his gaze is fixed firmly in the opposite direction, east, towards the holy city of Mecca. The whispers you have been hearing are solidifying into a plan, a Hajj, a pilgrimage. But when a man like Mansa Musa decides to fulfill a religious duty, it isn't a quiet, personal affair. It becomes an event that will mobilize the entire empire. It is to be his grand statement to the world. The official announcement comes not as a royal decree read from a scroll, but as a wave of purposeful action that ripples through neon eye. The whispers you've been hearing in the market finally take solid form, and the scale of it is almost impossible to grasp. It's confirmed. Mansa Musa will undertake the Hajj, the sacred pilgrimage to Mecca that is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. For a devout ruler like him, this is an ultimate act of faith. But you quickly realize it's much more than that. This isn't just a man going on a trip. It's an entire empire going on the road. It is, for all intents and purposes, a holy public relations tour. You see, the preparations begin immediately. The royal smiths, who usually spend their days crafting delicate jewelry and ceremonial weapons, are now casting gold into uniform bars, each one heavy enough to require 2 hands to lift. Couriers walk through the streets, not shouting, but calmly announcing the need for provisions. Thousands upon thousands of sacks of grain, dried meats, dates, and millet. Tailors who normally sew fine cotton robes are now working with tougher, more durable fabrics for travel, though you notice they still can't resist adding a touch of golden thread to the hems. This journey, you're told, serves multiple purposes. First and foremost is the religious obligation, a personal quest for the Mansa to walk the same sacred ground as the Prophet. Fulfilling this duty would solidify his standing as a pious and legitimate leader in the eyes of the wider Islamic world, from Morocco to Persia. But the second purpose is almost as important. Your empire, Mali, is fabulously wealthy, but to the powerful Sultanatess of Egypt, the learned scholars of Damascus, and the shock traders of Venice, it's a place of myth and lore. They know the gold comes from somewhere in the south, but they picture a wild, untamed land. They don't picture neon eye. They don't picture the organized markets, the royal court, the established laws. This journey is designed to change that. It's a statement. It's Mansa Musa planting a flag on the mental map of the world, announcing, we are here. We are powerful. We are pious. And yes, the rumors about the gold are true. In fact, they don't even begin to cover it. He isn't just going to Mecca. HCS taking Mali to the world. It's an exercise in what we might today call soft power. He was sending an army to conquer. He was sending a caravan to war. And then there's the economic angle. One of the fascinating, and frankly, kind of weird, historical tidbits is that West African gold was famously pure, much purer than the gold circulating in the Mediterranean, which had often been melted down and reminted countless times over centuries, picking up impurities along the way. Some scholars suggest that this pilgrimage was also a massive, international trade mission, a way to introduce this high-quality gold directly to the biggest markets in the world, bypassing the long chain of middlemen who controlled the trans-Saharan routes. It was a chance to set the price, to control the narrative of their most valuable commodity. You see the human side of this preparation too. Men are chosen from the army, not just for their strength, but for their discipline. Courtiers are selected for their knowledge of protocol in different languages. Even the women of the royal household are preparing, supervised by the man's senior wife. They are assembling everything from cooking pots to fine perfumes, ensuring that the royal standard of living will not drop. Even in the middle of the world's largest desert, there's a tension in the air, a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Old men who made the journey in their youth give advice to younger men who are packing their satchels for the first time. They talk about the heat of the day and the cold of the night, The best way to wrap a turban to protect from sandstorms. The signs of a good camel versus a bad one. A journey like this is a once-in-a-lifetime event, an honor that will be spoken of for generations, but it is also incredibly dangerous. The Sahara is not a welcoming place. It has claimed countless caravans before. The line between a glorious procession and a tragic disaster is perilously thin. Academics still debate the precise route Mansa Musa took, while the major stops like Wallet, Gaza, and Cairo are well documented. The exact paths connecting them are a subject of educated guesswork, pieced together from geographical clues and the logic of ancient trade routes. The choice of route could mean the difference between finding water and finding ruin. As you watch the preparations intensify, you understand that this sacred road trip is the ultimate gamble, a test of faith, logistics, and the sheer, overwhelming power of gold. The sheer scale of the operation starts to become terrifyingly real. It's one thing to hear about it, but it's another thing to see the logistics unfold before your eyes. This isn't just packing a few bags for a long trip. This is mobilizing a small nation, the term historians would later use. A city on the move feels less like a metaphor and more like a literal description. You walk to the edge of the city where a vast, temporary camp has sprung up, and what you see takes your breath away. Camels, more camels than you have ever seen in one place. They stretch from one end of the horizon to the other, a grumbling, groaning, spitting sea of beige and brown. Their distinctive, earthy smell hangs heavy in the air. These are the lifeblood of the journey, the ships of the desert. Handlers are checking their hooves, fitting them with specially designed pack saddles, and feeding them enormous piles of fodder to fatten them up for the lean months ahead. You would hear a number whispered among the men, a number so large it sounds like a joke. 1,000 camels, and that's just the personal baggage train. Then you see what they're loading. Not silks, not spices, not grain. Gold, pure, solid gold. You watch as 4 men strain to lift a single, heavy bar of it, sliding it into a specially reinforced wooden box. The box is then strapped to the side of a camel. Each camel, you learn, will carry between 100 and 300 pounds of it. The math is dizzying and frankly, a bit stupid. If 1,000 camels are carrying even the minimum, that's 100 pounds of gold. It's an amount that your brain can't properly process. It ceases to be money and becomes a geological feature they've decided to take with them. But the most iconic part of this whole spectacle isn't the bars. It's the dust. You see men filling hundreds upon hundreds of leather bags with fine gold dust. This is the spending money. This is the gold that will be given away, distributed as alms, used to pay for supplies and lodging. And then there are the special camels, the ones at the front of the procession. You're told that 8 to 100 of these camels will be dedicated to carrying nothing but sacks of gold dust, each sack weighing a fortune. They are a walking, breathing treasury, and that's just the cargo. Then there are the people. The number that settles as the official count is 60,000 people. It's the entire population of a respectable medieval city. This includes the military escort, a force of 12 soldiers, all fiercely loyal and equipped with the best gear the Empire can provide. It includes 500 heralds, dressed in silks and bearing golden staffs, who are to march ahead of the man's personal retinue. Their job, to announce his arrival, to clear the way, and to add to the sheer, overwhelming spectacle of it all. Then comes the domestic staff, cooks, doctors, tailors, grooms for the horses, handlers for the camels, and personal attendants for the royal family and high-ranking officials. And in a detail that sounds like pure legend but is consistently reported, you learn that Mansa Musa's senior wife is bringing her own retinue of 500 serving maids. Every single person on this list needs to be fed, watered, and accounted for, every single day, for a journey that will last well over a year. One of the most delightfully bizarre, cold knowledge facts about this caravan concerns the animals. It was just camels. Mansa Musa rode a horse, as did his senior cavalry. So hundreds of the finest stallions from the imperial stables were brought along, with their own grooms and special provisions. But here's the thing, horses are terrible in the deep desert. They need far more water than camels and are not well suited to the sandy terrain, so why bring them? For the entrance, the plan was to ride the camels through the desert and then, when approaching a major city like Cairo, switch to the magnificent horses for a grand, awe-inspiring entry. It was pure, unadulterated showmanship, a logistical nightmare undertaken for the sake of a few hours of looking good. Historians still puzzle over the exact numbers. Was it really 60,000 people? Was it truly that much gold? The figures come to us from second-hand accounts, told by awestruck observers in Cairo and elsewhere, and recorded by scholars like Al-Umari. It's entirely possible, even likely, that the numbers were exaggerated over time, growing with each retelling. But what isn't in dispute is that the caravan was of a scale previously unseen, a display so opulent that it shattered the expectations of everyone who witnessed it. Standing there, amidst the chaos of the final preparations, you realize you're not just a witness to history. You're now a part of the craziest, most extravagant packing list ever conceived. The day of departure is less a single moment and more a slow, dawning realization before the sun has even thought about rising. The low, persistent hum begins to vibrate through the city. It's the sound of 60,000 people waking up. You are one of them. You've been assigned a role, a place in this vast, moving organism. Perhaps you're a soldier, checking the strap on your shield. Maybe you're a cook, your mind already on the colossal task of the first day's meal. Or maybe you're just an attendant, a tiny cog in the great machine, whose only job is to ensure a specific tent is packed correctly. As the first light of dawn spills over the flat rooftops of Mianai, you get your first proper look at the full caravan, assembled and ready to move. It's not a single file line. It's a river of humanity, several hundred yards wide, stretching for miles into the distance. It's so long that you can't see the beginning or the end. At the very front, far ahead, are the 500 heralds, their silk robes a splash of vibrant color against the dusty brown landscape. Their golden staffs, even from this distance, catch the morning sun. They are the outriders, the announcers of the coming spectacle. Then comes the vanguard of the army, thousands of elite soldiers. They are the teeth of this procession. They move with a quiet, disciplined rhythm, their steps practiced, their eyes constantly scanning the horizon. You see your fellow travelers, the vast civilian contingent, finding their places, people cluster in groups based on their profession, their village of origin, or their family ties. It's a microcosm of the empire on the move. Merchants walk beside scholars, blacksmiths beside tailors. There's a nervous energy, a mix of chatter, laughter, and the occasional shouted instruction. You see the women of the court, veiled and riding on comfortably appointed camels, surrounded by their attendants. This is a point of some scholarly debate. While accounts confirm the presence of Mansa Musa's senior wife and her entourage, the exact role and freedom of movement for women in the caravan is less clear. Reflecting the varied customs across the medieval Islamic world, it was certainly not common for such a large number of women to undertake such a perilous journey, which makes their presence all the more remarkable. And then there's the gold. The camels laden with the golden bars are interspersed throughout the caravan, each one guarded by a small detachment of soldiers. It's a smart move, decentralizing the treasure to make it harder to raid. But the show ponies, the 100 camels carrying the sacks of gold dust, they are near the front, just behind the military vanguard. They are a statement, a promise of the generosity to come. Somewhere in the center of this human river is the Mansa himself. You can't see him clearly, but you can see the cluster of activity that marks his position. The great silk parasol, the flurry of high-ranking officials on horseback, the elite personal guard known as the Sofas. He is the calm eye in the center of this magnificent hurricane. One of the more peculiar roles within this group belongs to a specific type of servant. You see them walking near the front, just behind the gold dust camels. Each one carries a simple leather pouch, but instead of holding it, they swing it in a gentle arc, releasing a fine, shimmering mist. They are the gold dusters. Their entire job, a task that would sound like a fever dream in any other context, is to sprinkle gold dust on the path in front of the Mansa. It's not for trade. It's not for show, at least not in the traditional sense. It's an offering, a way of sanctifying the ground he walks on, of showing that gold is so plentiful it can be returned to the earth without a second thought. As the sun climbs higher, a deep, resonant sound echoes across the plain. It's the sound of 100 large drums, beating a slow, steady rhythm. It's the signal to move. The front of the caravan lurches forward, and slowly, like a waking giant, the entire column begins to shuffle. The creak of leather, the grumble of camels, the soft murmur of thousands of voices, and the rhythmic beat of the drums all merge into a single, overwhelming sound. You take your first step, leaving the familiar safety of Neon Eye behind. You are now part of this golden river, one of 60,000 souls. Your face turned east, ready to walk into the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Sahara. The journey has begun. The first few days are a gentle introduction, a transition from the familiar savanna grasslands of the empire's heartland into something much harsher. The ground under your feet changes. The rich, dark earth gives way to sandy soil, and the lush baobabs and acacia trees become sparser, their foliage thinner. The air grows drier, and you find yourself licking your lips more often. The sun seems to get a little bit hotter each day, its glare more intense. You are now on the threshold of the Sahara, the great ocean of sand that the Arabs call Al-Bahr Belama, the sea without water. From your vantage point within the caravan, the sheer scale of it is humbling. You look left, you look right, and the line of people and animals seems to stretch into infinity. The dust kicked up by 60,000 people and thousands of animals creates a permanent, low-hanging cloud that softens the horizon, making the whole world feel hazy and dreamlike. The rhythm of your life changes completely. It is now dictated by two things: the sun and the need for water. You rise before dawn. In the cool, gray pre-light, the camp is already stirring, the sound of movement and preparation a constant hum. A quick meal of dried meat and millet paste, and then the drums begin their slow, steady beat. The caravan unfurls, and you begin to walk. The morning hours are the best for travel, the air still holding a remnant of the night's chill. By midday, the sun is a merciless white disk in the sky. The heat is a physical presence, pressing down on you. The light reflects off the sand with a blinding intensity. This is when the column slows, and sometimes, if the heat is too extreme, it stops altogether. You seek whatever shade you can find. The shadow of a camel, a makeshift awning stretched between the spears, or simply the shade provided by your own turban, wrapped carefully to cover your neck and face. Water is distributed, a carefully measured ration. Its warm and tastes of the goatskin bag gets carried in, but it is the most precious thing you own. As the afternoon wanes and the sun begins its descent, the caravan picks up its pace again, making the most of the slightly cooler temperatures. You march until dusk, when the drums signal the end of the day's travel. And then, a miracle of logistics unfolds. The moving city becomes a stationary one. Tents blossom across the desert floor with practiced efficiency. Fires are lit, their smoke curling into the rapidly cooling air. The smell of cooking stews, flatbreads, grilling meat for the higher-ranking officials fills the evening. One evening, you look out from the relative order of the camp into the true desert. The sun has set, and the sky is a deep, bruised purple, fading to black. With no city lights to compete, the stars emerge with a brilliance you've never witnessed before. They aren't just points of light. They are a thick, shimmering blanket thrown across the heavens. The Milky Way is a luminous, milky river, a celestial echo of your own golden river on earth. The silence is profound. The moment the camp settles, the noise of the day is swallowed by the immense emptiness of the desert. It is both peaceful and terrifying. It is here that you truly understand the genius of your king, or at least, the genius of his quartermasters. This journey is only possible because it follows the ancient, invisible highways of the desert, the trans-Saharan trade routes. These are not paved roads, but well-trodden paths that link a series of vital oases and wells, mapped out in the minds of the caravan guides. These guides are some of the most respected men in the entire procession. They navigate not by sight alone, but by the stars, by the direction of the wind, by the texture of the sand, and by a memory passed down through generations. Historians often emphasize the goal, but the real feat of this journey was the mastery of the environment. The amount of planning required to ensure that 60 Zaro people arrived at a specific well before it was drunk dry is mind-boggling. There is an ongoing scholarly discussion about whether the caravan traveled as a single entity or in several waves to avoid overwhelming the fragile resources of the oases. Logic suggests they must have broken into smaller, more manageable groups, but the legend, the image that has persisted for 700 years, is of one single, unbroken column of gold and humanity, pressing its way across the sand. As you pull your cloak tighter against the surprising chill of the desert night, you feel like a single grain of sand in that legendary column, a tiny part of something immense and unstoppable, moving deeper into the vast, silent sea of sand. Life within the moving city settles into a surprisingly predictable routine. The initial shock of the scale and the environment gives way to the mundane reality of daily existence. Your world shrinks to the few people you walk with, the specific duties you perform, and the constant, pressing needs of your body for food, water, and rest. The logistics of keeping this city alive are a constant, rolling miracle. Every morning, you see the royal quartermasters at work. They are a stern, efficient group of men who manage the vast storerooms of the caravan, the camels laden with grain, dried fruit, and other non-perishables. They are the masters of inventory. They know to the last handful of millet how much food is on hand and how much is being consumed each day. Their calculations are the only thing standing between this grand procession and mass starvation. Water is, of course, the most critical resource. The entire route is a carefully planned dot-to-dot of wells and oases. When the caravan arrives at a water source, a strict hierarchy is observed. The royal household and the horses are watered first, then the soldiers, then the civilian population, section by section. Finally, the thousands of camels, who can drink prodigious amounts, are led to the wells. The process can take hours, sometimes an entire day, turning the area around the well into a chaotic, bustling hub of activity. You witness firsthand the ingenuity required to feed so many. Massive cauldrons, transported on special carts, are set up every evening. The staple meal for most of the caravan is a simple, hearty stew or porridge made from millet or sorghum, sometimes supplemented with dried meat or fish. It's not luxurious, but it's hot and filling. For the elite, it's a different story. You catch the scent of roasting lamb or goat from the area of the camp reserved for the Mansa and his court. They have their own cooks, their own supply chains, and even their own livestock, herded along at the rear of the caravan. A bizarre but true detail of the expedition. A herd of cattle was brought along to provide fresh milk and meat for the royal table. Keeping a herd of cattle alive through the Sahara is a logistical feat so difficult and unnecessary that its only purpose could have been to maintain a very specific standard of living. The caravan is also a functioning society with its own system of justice. Minor disputes, a disagreement over a ration, an argument between two merchants are settled on the spot by designated officials. Theft, a potentially capital offense in this environment where a stolen water skin could mean death, is dealt with swiftly and publicly to deter others. The Mansa himself, it is said, holds court even while traveling, listening to petitions and dispensing judgment from his mobile audience stand. One of the more subtle aspects of life on the move is the constant maintenance. Blacksmiths are not just for show. They are vital for repairing everything from cooking pots to the metal fittings on a saddle. Leather workers are constantly mending torn bags, harnesses, and sandals, which wear out at an alarming rate on the hot, abrasive sand. Doctors, trained in the medical traditions of the time, are always busy, treating everything from dehydration and sunstroke to scorpion stings and the blisters that are the constant companions of every walker. Academics have long debated the economic impact of the caravan on the lands it passed through before it reached Egypt. Did they buy all their supplies along the way, or did they carry everything with them? The answer is likely a bit of both. The core provisions were certainly packed from the start, but for an army of 60, Daro, opportunities to purchase fresh food and water from local tribes and oasis dwellers would have been essential. This meant that the caravan was not just a moving spectacle, but also a moving economy, injecting bursts of gold dust into remote desert communities that had likely never seen such wealth. For these small communities, the arrival of the Mansa's caravan must have been like a fleet of alien spaceships landing, an event that would be talked about for a century. As you trudge along, day after day, you become part of this rhythm. You learn the personalities of the camels in your section. You know which handler tells the best stories in the evening. You know the exact moment the sun will hit a certain dune and turn it from orange to fiery red. The initial awe has been replaced by a weary sense of belonging. You are a citizen of this temporary, rolling city, a city whose only purpose is to move east, a city held together by discipline, routine, and an astonishing amount of forward planning. As the caravan pushes deeper into the heart of the desert, the landscape becomes more monotonous, a seemingly endless expanse of rock and sand under a bleached white sky. The value system you grew up with in neon eye begins to feel distant, almost abstract. Back home, gold was the ultimate measure of wealth, the foundation of your entire world. Here, under the crushing weight of the sun, you would trade a pouch of gold dust for a full water skin without a moment's hesitation. Your priorities have been stripped down to the essentials of survival. It is in this state of mind that you first encounter the other gold, the white gold. Salt. The caravan approaches a place that looks like a scar on the face of the planet. This is Tag Hawza, one of the most famous and desolate salt mines in the medieval world. It's not a city, not even a town. It's a mining outpost, a collection of wretched-looking buildings constructed not from packed earth or wood. There are no trees here but from blocks of salt. The walls of the huts glitter in the sun, and the air is so dry it stings your nostrils. The only reason human beings exist in this forsaken spot is the immense deposit of pure, crystalline salt that lies just beneath the surface. You watch as the miners, mostly enslaved people owned by the desert tribes who control the mines, work in the punishing heat. They cut massive, rectangular slabs of salt from the open pits. The salt is so pure it's almost translucent. These slabs, weighing nearly 200 pounds each, are the standard currency of the Sahara. A single slab is hoisted onto the back of a camel, which can carry two at a time, and begins its long journey south. Here, you witness a fascinating transaction that illustrates the bizarre economics of the Sahara. A salt merchant from Tag Hawza, his skin leathery from the sun and wind, approaches one of the Mansa's quartermasters. They don't haggle with words. The quartermaster pours a pile of your familiar, shimmering gold dust onto a cloth. The salt merchant, in turn, indicates a number of salt slabs. They go back and forth, adjusting the piles, until they reach an agreement. In this part of the world, a pound of gold is traded for a pound of salt. To you, who grew up where gold nuggets were the king's property and gold dust bought you anything you could want, this is mind-bending. But it makes perfect sense. In the humid, tropical climate of the Mali Empire and the lands to its south, salt is incredibly scarce and absolutely essential for human and animal life. It's used for preserving food, for health, and as a vital nutrient. Gold, on the other hand, is plentiful in the desert and along the Mediterranean coast. The opposite is true. Salt is abundant, but gold is the rare and coveted measure of wealth. Your empire's power is built on controlling this exchange, mastering the arbitrage between two worlds with completely different ideas of what is valuable. This system of trade, the silent trade, is a wonderfully strange historical phenomenon. For centuries, traders from the north would bring salt to a designated spot on the border of the gold-producing lands. They would leave their salt slabs and retreat. The gold miners would then come, inspect the salt, and leave what they considered a fair amount of gold dust next to each slab. They would then retreat. The salt traders would return, and if they were happy with the amount of gold, they would take it and leave, completing the trade. If not, they would leave the gold and wait for a better offer. This entire process often happened without the two parties ever seeing or speaking to each other. Historians still debate the precise mechanics and reasons for this. Was it due to language barriers, mutual distrust, or deeply ingrained ritual? Whatever the reason, it allowed for a stable and continuous flow of goods for centuries. As the caravan prepares to leave Tag Halsa, you see that we have taken on a new cargo. While the gold is still the main event, many camels are now also laden with the heavy, crystalline slabs of salt. It's not for use on the journey. The caravan has its own supply of granulated salt. This is for trade. It's a valuable commodity that will be bartered for supplies in the markets of the cities you are yet to reach. Watching a camel being loaded with a fortune in gold on one side and a fortune in salt on the other is a powerful lesson in the relativity of wealth. Value is determined by where you are and what you need. In the vast, thirsty Sahara, you learn that not all that glitters is gold, but sometimes it's salt. The journey from Tag Halsa onward is a grueling, monotonous stretch. The landscape offers little variation, just sand, rock, and the occasional skeletal remains of a camel that didn't make it, a stark reminder of the stakes. The sun beats down, the wind whispers, and the only sound is the rhythmic shuffle of thousands of feet and toes. It is in this hypnotic, unchanging environment that your mind can start to play tricks on you. One searingly hot afternoon, you see it, far on the horizon. A shimmering, impossible sight. A beautiful, clear lake, its surface ruffled by a gentle breeze, lined with lush, green palm trees. A collective sigh of relief and excitement triples through the caravan. People point, their voices cracking with thirst and hope. The guides, however, show no reaction. They don't alter their course. They just keep plodding forward with a grim, knowing patience. It's a mirage, a cruel trick of the light, caused by the superheated air near the ground bending the light from the sky. You know this intellectually, but your senses scream that the water is real. As you get closer, the image wavers, distorts, and then vanishes into the shimmering heat haze, leaving nothing but more empty desert. It's a powerful lesson in trusting the experience of your guides over the desperate testimony of your own eyes. This is why the guides are so revered. They know the difference between what is real and what the desert wants you to believe. The journey isn't just a battle against the elements. It's also a battle against the constant, nagging possibility of getting lost. One evening, a fierce sandstorm, the haboob, descends upon the camp. It arrives as a towering wall of churning, brown dust that blots out the sun. The world is reduced to a roaring, suffocating chaos. You huddle behind a camel, your turban wrapped tight around your face, breathing through the cloth. As the wind howls and sand gets into everything, the storm rages for hours. When it finally subsides, the world is transformed. The familiar dunes have shifted, their shapes altered. The tracks of the caravan have been completely erased. For a moment, a palpable sense of fear spreads through the camp. The path is gone. In the morning, you watch the senior guides confer. They don't look panicked. They look at the sun's position. They taste the wind. That night, they will spend hours studying the stars, consulting their celestial map. Their knowledge of astronomy isn't just academic. It's a survival tool. This reliance on ancient wisdom is a key part of the story. While Mansa Musa's caravan was a feat of wealth and logistics, it was utterly dependent on pre-modern technology and knowledge. One of the more peculiar and less verified tricks of desert navigation from that era involves a very specific type of bird. Some accounts from desert travelers describe guides using a kind of homing pigeon, not to send messages, but to find direction. The bird, when released, would circle and then instinctively fly in the direction of the nearest water source. Its natural senses far more acute than a human's. Whether this was used on Mus's journey is unknown, but it speaks to the deep well of ecological knowledge that these guides possessed. Of course, not every challenge is so dramatic. There are small, daily crises. A camel throws its load and bolts, leading to a frantic chase. A sack of grain is found to have been contaminated by insects and must be discarded, its loss carefully noted by the quartermasters. Tensions can flare between people frayed by the relentless heat and monotony. These small fires are quickly put out by the disciplined military escort, who act as the caravan's police force. A persistent question for historians is how the caravan dealt with death. With 60 people traveling for over a year in such harsh conditions, people certainly died from illness, accident, or exhaustion. How were they buried? What rituals were performed? The chronicles are silent on this mundane, tragic reality. There are no accounts of the caravan stopping for funerals. The grim likelihood is that burials were swift and simple, a necessity of keeping the massive column moving. To stop for every individual death would have been impossible. The needs of the many, in this case, outweighed the rights for the few. It's a somber thought that haunts the edges of this otherwise glamorous story. Slowly, painstakingly, the guides re-establish the route, the drums start their beat again, and the great river of people lurches back into motion. The mirage, the sandstorm there remind us that you are a guest in this vast, unforgiving landscape. You are not its master. Your gold cannot command the sun to be cooler or the wind to be still. Your survival depends entirely on the ancient, hard-won wisdom of the men leading the way. After what feels like an eternity in the beige and ochre emptiness, a new color appears on the horizon. Green, not the deceptive, shimmering green of a mirage, but a deep, solid, living green. It's the first sign of an oasis, a splash of life in the middle of the void. As you get closer, the shapes resolve into date palms, their fronds rustling in the breeze. A sound so lovely and full of life it almost makes you weep. This isn't a major city, not even a town. It's a small, isolated settlement, a cluster of a few dozen packed earth huts huddled around a spring. Its existence a miracle of geography. For the people who live here, life is a quiet, predictable rhythm dictated by the dates they harvest and the few goats they keep. Their only connection to the outside world is the occasional small caravan that stops to trade for water and rest. And then you arrive. It's less an arrival and more an invasion, albeit a peaceful one. The 60,000-person caravan descends upon the oasis like a slow-motion flood. The residents, probably alerted days in advance by the sheer dust cloud your caravan creates, watch from their homes with a mixture of terror and awe. Their entire world, their quiet patch of green, is suddenly overwhelmed by a city's worth of people, animals, and noise. But this is where you get your first glimpse of Mansa Musa's strategy, his theory of power. He isn't here to conquer or intimidate. He is here to impress. The heralds in their silk robes enter first, their golden staffs gleaming. They don't shout demands. They announce the arrival of the great Mansa of Modi on his holy pilgrimage to Mecca. They speak of his piety, his greatness, and his generosity. And then the generosity begins. It's a trial run for the grand performance to come in Cairo. You watch as the quartermasters, under direct orders from the Mansa, distribute food from your own supplies, sacks of grain and dates given freely to the bewildered locals. Then comes the gold, not in bars, but in dust. Officials walk through the small settlement, giving a pouch of gold dust to every family. It's not a payment for water or supplies, though those are also paid for handsomely. It's a gift, an act of charity, for the people of the oasis. This is an event that defies comprehension. The amount of gold given to a single family is likely more than they would see in a decade, or even a lifetime. You see the confusion on their faces. What do you even do with this much wealth in a place where there is almost nothing to buy? It's a gesture so extravagant it borders on the absurd. One of the more charming, unverified anecdotes that attaches itself to this part of the journey is about the man's personal touch. The story goes that he would not just send his officials, but would himself, in the evenings, walk through the oases he stopped at. He would visit the local mosque, no matter how small or simple, and leave a substantial donation for its upkeep or rebuilding. He would speak to the local imam, the religious leader, inquiring about his needs. This act served to reinforce his image as a truly pious man, not just a wealthy one. It was a brilliant piece of public relations, demonstrating that his power was rooted in faith, not just material wealth. This is also where the caravan takes a much-needed pause. The people and animals rest and recuperate. The wells are used heavily, but the stay is managed carefully to not deplete them entirely. Blacksmiths and leather workers set up temporary workshops, making repairs. The doctor's tents are full. It's a pit stop for the entire moving city. But there's a subtle economic consequence to this act of generosity, a foreshadowing of what's to come. For the next small caravan that passes through this oasis, things will be different. The prices for dates and water might be slightly higher. The idea of what constitutes wealth has been momentarily warped. Mansa Musa's gesture, born of piety and a desire to impress, has unknowingly planted a tiny seed of inflation in the middle of the Sahara. Historians are divided on the primary motivation for this small-scale generosity. Was it purely religious altruism, a fulfillment of the Islamic duty to give alms, or was it a calculated political act, a way of ensuring that tales of his incredible wealth and magnanimity would travel far and wide, smoothing his path and building his legend long before he reached the great cities of the north? The most likely answer is that it was both. In the worldview of a ruler like Mansa Musa, piety and power were not separate concepts. They were inextricably intertwined. As you prepare to leave the oasis, rested and respired, you look back at the small settlement. You have left them with more wealth than they know what to do with. You have given them a story they will tell for generations. And you have, in a very small way, broken their economy. You are learning that your king's generosity is a force of nature, as powerful and as disruptive as a sandstorm. The character of the journey changes again. The endless, rolling dunes of the deep Sahara begin to give way to a harder, more gravity terrain, interspersed with rocky outcrops and plateaus. The air, while still dry, loses some of its searing, furnace-like quality. You start to see more signs of life, not just isolated oases, but more frequent settlements, small trading posts, and the occasional fortress guarding a mountain pass. You are leaving the vast emptiness behind and entering the sphere of influence of a different great power, the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt. The sense of anticipation in the caravan is palpable. For months, the only goal was survival. The next well, the next patch of shade. Now, there is a destination in sight. A name is on every owner's lips, spoken with a mixture of reverence and excitement. Al-Qaahira, Cairo, the victorious city. For you, a child of the Mali Empire, Cairo is a place of legend. It's the city of 1,000 minarets, the seat of the Sultan, the home of the great Al-Azhar University, a center of learning and commerce that draws people from all over the known world. It's the largest city you can imagine, a place where the Mediterranean world meets the East. It represents the ultimate destination of the trans-Saharan trade routes your empire commands, the gold you've been escorting for all these months. This is its final market. As the caravan gets closer, you start to see the tendrils of its influence. You encounter trade caravans heading south, laden not with salt, but with goods you've only seen in the possession of the wealthiest nobles in Neon Eye. Fine textiles, worked metal goods, paper, and spices from lands so far east they are almost mythical. The merchants in these caravans, Egyptians and Syrians with sharp eyes and sharper bargaining skills, stare at your procession with undisguised astonishment. They've seen large caravans before, but nothing like this. The sheer number of people, the discipline of the soldiers, and the unmistakable glint of gold on the staffs of the heralds, it all signals that this is something unprecedented. Then, one morning, you crest a ridge, and the guides point to the horizon. At first, you see nothing but the hazy sky, but as you stare, you begin to make out a faint, dark line. It's not a mountain range, it's a smudge of green, far greener and more vast than any oasis you have ever seen. It's the Nile Valley, the lifeblood of Egypt. The sight sends a jolt of energy through the exhausted travelers. The pace quickens, the mood lifts, the drums beat with a renewed vigor. The approach to the Nile takes several more days. But with every step, the world becomes more fertile and populated. You pass through villages surrounded by fields of wheat, barley, and clover. You see farmers working with water buffalo, a sight completely alien to you. The air is thick with the smell of river water and vegetation. After months in the desert, it's an intoxicating perfume. Finally, you reach the banks of the great river itself, the Nile. It is wider and slower moving than you imagined. A vast, brown ribbon of life cutting through the desert. On its surface are boats with large, triangular lateen sails, carrying goods and people between the countless towns that line its banks. The world here is bustling, noisy, and crowded. It's an almost overwhelming sensory experience after the profound silence of the Sahara. The plan, you learn, is not to march straight into Cairo. Protocol must be observed. Messengers are sent ahead to the court of the Mamluk Sultan, Al-Nasir Muhammad, to formally announce the arrival of the Mansa of Mali and to request permission to enter his city. This is a delicate diplomatic dance. The Mamluks are a proud and powerful military dynasty, the undisputed masters of Egypt and Syria. They are not accustomed to foreign rulers arriving with what is essentially a private army. There is, of course, a strange historical irony here that probably was lost on the more educated members of the court. The Mamluks themselves were originally enslaved people, mostly of Turkic or Circassian origin, who were trained as elite soldiers and rose to become rulers. Mansa Musa, on the other hand, was the ruler of an empire whose wealth was partly derived from the trade of enslaved people captured in non-Muslim territories to its south. Now, the fabulously wealthy African king was coming to seek audience with the sultan whose predecessors were, themselves, a form of traded commodity. The complexities and contradictions of the medieval world are laid bare on the banks of the Nile, while you wait for the diplomatic niceties to be sorted. The caravan sets up a massive temporary camp on the west bank of the Nile, near the great pyramids of Giza. You stare up at these colossal stone structures, already ancient beyond comprehension even in the 14th century. They are monuments to a different kind of power, a different kind of wealth. They seem to watch your temporary city of tents and gold with a silent, stony indifference. The first beat of Cairo's heart is the awe you feel standing in the shadow of its past, on the doorstep of its vibrant, chaotic present. The performance is about to begin. The permission from the Sultan arrives, carried by a retinue of Mamluk officials in crisp, elegant robes. Their demeanor is professional, but you can see the curiosity and barely concealed astonishment in their eyes as they take in the sheer size of your camp. The day is set for your entrance into Cairo. This is the moment the entire journey has been building towards. The showmanship that was hinted at in the desert oases is about to be unleashed on the greatest city in the Islamic world. On the morning of the entrance, the caravan transforms. The dusty, travel-worn look is shed like a snake's skin. Everyone brings out their finest clothes, saved for this very occasion. The soldiers polish their spears and shields. The 500 heralds don their most brilliant silk robes, their golden staffs polished until they blaze in the morning sun. The horses, which were carefully conserved through the last leg of the journey, are brought out. They are magnificent, powerful stallions, draped in embroidered cloths and fitted with saddles decorated with, you guessed it, more gold. The caravan crosses the Nile. There aren't enough boats to transport everyone at once, so it's a massive, day-long operation. A bridge of boats is constructed for the main procession, while thousands of others are ferried across. You finally set foot in the lands of Cairo proper. The city isn't a walled-off entity you enter through a single gate. It's a sprawling metropolis, with a dense core-old Cairo, the administrative center and vast suburbs that stretch out to meet the farmland. And then, the procession begins its formal march into the city. It is, without a doubt, the most spectacular thing you have ever seen. At the very front are the 500 heralds, walking in perfect formation. Behind them, on horseback, is the vanguard of the Malian army, 12,000 strong. They are not in aggressive battle formation, but in a parade march. Their discipline and sheer numbers a potent display of power. Then comes the man himself. Mansa Musa rides not a camel, but a magnificent dark horse. He is dressed in a simple but fine white robe, which makes the gold of his skull cap and the intricate embroidery on his clothes stand out all the more. He is flanked by his senior commanders and courtiers, on horseback. In front of him walk thousands of his own attendants, and immediately preceding his horse, you see them, the men with the pouches of gold dust, lightly sprinkling the ground he is about to tread upon. Behind the man comes the river of gold itself. The 80 to 100 camels, each carrying hundreds of pounds of gold dust, a mobile treasury on display for the entire city to see. And behind them, the rest of the vast caravan, a sea of people that flows through the streets of Cairo like a human tide. The reaction of the Cairenes is everything the Mansa could have hoped for. The streets are packed with people, pushed back by Mamluk soldiers assigned to keep the route clear. Every rooftop, every balcony, every window is filled with spectators. At first, there is a stunned silence. The people of Cairo are used to parades and processions. They've seen the Sultan's Mamluk guards, famously ostentatious in their own right, but they have never seen anything like this. This isn't a military parade. It's an exhibition of wealth so extreme it seems to break reality. The sheer, unadulterated amount of gold is what shatters their comprehension. It's not just on the staffs or the saddles. It's the color of the entire procession. The clothes, the banners, the very dust on the ground seems to glitter. This spectacle is the source of one of the most enduring, though likely exaggerated, details of the story. It was said that the Mansa gave a golden staff to each of his 500 heralds. While probably an embellishment, it captures the spirit of the event perfectly. It was a calculated display of a level of wealth that the Mediterranean world simply didn't know existed. The procession wends its way through the labyrinthine streets of Cairo towards the citadel, the fortified complex where the Sultan resided. The city is a riot of sound and color. The call to prayer from 100 minarets mixes with the beat of the Malian drums and the gasps of the crowd. The smells of the city's famous spice markets, cardamom, cloves, cumin mingle with the scent of your desert caravan. It's a moment of supreme triumph. For centuries, your home has been on the periphery of the Islamic world, a source of raw materials, a place of myth. In a single afternoon, Mansa Musa has dragged it to the very center of the map. He has replaced the myths with a reality that is even more incredible. This grand entrance is a masterstroke of political theater. He hasn't fired a single arrow, but he has conquered the imagination of the most powerful city he will ever visit. The academic back and forth on this event is fascinating. How much of the description, which comes to us from later Arab chroniclers, is journalistic fact, and how much is literary hyperbole designed to create a good story? It's impossible to say, but the core truth is undisputed. A king from West Africa arrived in Cairo and put on a show so stunning that people were still talking and writing about it decades, even centuries later. You are marching in the middle of a living legend being born. The grand procession snakes its way through the crowded streets and finally arrives at the base of the Cairo citadel, a formidable fortress perched on a hill, the seat of Mamluk power. This is the heart of the Egyptian state, a place of rigid protocol and military precision. As magnificent as your entrance was, here, you are on someone else's turf, and you must play by their rules. Or at least, that's the expectation. The Mansa and his senior entourage dismount and are escorted into the audience hall of the Sultan. Al-Nasir Muhammad, you, as a lower-ranking member of the caravan, are not present for this meeting, but the story of what happened inside spreads through your camp like wildfire within hours. It's a tale of a subtle but intense clash of wills, a moment of high diplomatic drama. Inside the grand hall, the Sultan is seated on his throne, surrounded by his emirs and the highest-ranking Mamluk officers. The protocol is clear and absolute. Anyone granted an audience with the Sultan, regardless of their own rank, must kiss the ground before him as a sign of submission and respect for his authority. It's a standard procedure, a non-negotiable part of the court ceremony. But when Mansa Musa is ushered in, he hesitates. He is a king in his own right, the absolute ruler of a vast and powerful empire. In his own court, people prostrate themselves before him. To perform this act would be to acknowledge the Sultan of Egypt as his superior, a concession he is unwilling to make. His refusal, however polite, sends a palpable shock through the hall. It's a breach of etiquette so profound it borders on an insult. The Mamluk officials are aghast. They try to insist, explaining that this is the custom. For a tense few moments, a major diplomatic incident hangs in the air. The entire purpose of the visit, the goodwill, the grand impression, is at risk of shattering over a point of pride. Mansa Musa, however, is a shrewd diplomat. He understands he cannot win a direct confrontation. So, he finds a brilliant way out. According to the account recorded by the scholar Al-Umari, who heard the story from an emir who was present, the Mansa declared, "I am a follower of the Maliki school of Islamic law, and according to our teachings, we prostrate ourselves before no one but God." He then turned, faced the direction of Mecca, and performed a full prostration, a sujudi, as if in prayer, stating that this act was for God alone, who had brought him safely to this place. This was an act of pure genius. He fulfilled the physical requirement of prostration, thus satisfying the Mamluk's need for the gesture to be performed, but he had completely reframed its meaning. He wasn't submitting to the Sultan. He was submitting to God. He upheld his own royal dignity while simultaneously reinforcing his image as an exceptionally pious man. He turned a moment of potential humiliation into another demonstration of his character. The Sultan, Al-Nasir Muhammad, was reportedly so impressed by this clever maneuver that he immediately rose from his throne, walked to where Mansa Musa was, greeted him as an equal, and had a seat brought for him to sit beside him. The crisis was averted. The two rulers, one the master of the Nile, the other the master of the Niger, sat and spoke as peers. This specific anecdote is a gem for historians, as it reveals so much about the personalities involved. However, like many good stories from the period, its absolute literal truth is debated. Some historians suggest the story might have been embellished by Mus's own people to magnify his prestige. Others argue that the Mamluk sources, not wanting to seem slighted, might have downplayed the initial tension. Did he really refuse so boldly? Did he come up with that excuse on the spot? We'll likely never know the exact choreography of the event. What is certain is that a meeting took place, and that Mansa Musa managed to navigate the treacherous waters of Mamluk court protocol without diminishing his own status. This single event sets the tone for his entire 3-month stay in Cairo. He is not just another visiting dignitary. He is a force to be reckoned with, a man of immense wealth, deep piety, and a keen political mind. He has won the respect of the most powerful ruler in the region. The awkward part is over. Now, with the formal introductions complete, he is free to turn his attention to the city of Cairo itself, and to unleash the second phase of his plan, a flood of generosity that will change the city forever. With the diplomatic hurdles cleared and his status as a fellow monarch cemented, Mansa Musa settles in for his extended stay in Cairo. He and his highest-ranking officials are given a palace for their use, while the rest of the vast caravan remains encamped outside the city. And now, the true purpose of all that gold you've been hauling across the desert becomes clear. It wasn't for tribute. It wasn't for trade, not in the conventional sense. It was for giving away. The generosity starts almost immediately and on a scale that Cairo, a city that had seen everything, had never witnessed before. It's a calculated deluge of charity and gift-giving. The Mansa, it seems, is on a one-man mission to personally stimulate the Cairene economy. Whether it needs it or not, you see it happening every day. The poor who line the streets are not given a small coin or a piece of bread. They are given handfuls of gold dust, enough to feed their families for months. On Fridays, the holy day, Mansa Musa makes his way to a different mosque in the city for prayers. Each time, he leaves behind a staggering donation for the mosque's upkeep, for its scholars, and for the needy in its parish. He becomes a folk hero overnight. His name spoken with awe in the city's poorest quarters. But his generosity isn't limited to the poor. It's a strategic tool. He showers gifts upon the Mamluk emirs and officials he had met at court. A fine silk robe for one, a purse of gold for another, a rare artifact from his homeland for a third. These are not bribes. They are gifts. A way of building relationships and ensuring his time in the city is smooth and pleasant. He is greasing the wheels of the entire Mamluk bureaucracy with gold. He seeks out the city's scholars, poets, and judges. He spends hours in conversation with them, discussing theology, law, and history, and at the end of these conversations, he bestows upon them gifts of gold so substantial that they are, in effect, research grants that could fund their work for years. He is buying goodwill, but he is also demonstrating that he is not just a rich barbarian from the south. He is a man of culture and learning, a patron of the arts and sciences. The gold flows like water from a broken dam. It's said that every member of his 60-person entourage, down to the last camel driver, is given a spending allowance in gold dust. They flood the famous Lily market, a sprawling labyrinth of shops and stalls. They buy everything they can get their hands on. Textiles, spices, perfumes, books, pottery, needlework. They are not haggling. They are paying whatever price is asked, often more. Their generosity and naivete in this new, complex market making them the dream customers of every merchant in the city. One of the most curious and specific accounts of his spending spree comes from the chronicler Al-Umurai. He noted that the Mansa seemed to have an almost compulsive need to give. When he would hear of a royal official or a courtier who had done him some small service, he would send over a gift of gold. If he passed a particularly beautiful building, he might inquire about the owner and send them a gift. It was a constant, almost daily, outpouring. This is where the story gets really interesting for economists. This was the modern, diversified economy. The value of its currency was directly tied to the perceived scarcity of the precious metals that backed it in this case, gold and silver. Gold was valuable because it was rare. What Mansa Musa was doing, through his seemingly boundless generosity, was systematically destroying that rarity. He was introducing a massive new supply of gold into a closed system. A little-known fact that adds a layer of complexity to this is the type of gold he was spending. As you know from your homeland, Malian gold was legendarily pure. The gold currency used in Cairo at the time was the dinar, which had a specific, regulated gold content. The raw gold dust and bullion that Musa was handing out was of a much higher quality. So not only was he flooding the market with gold, he was flooding it with a premium, uncut version of the product. It was like pouring rocket fuel into a regular car engine. The initial effect was a roar of power, but the eventual breakdown was inevitable. You, as a member of the caravan, are a direct participant in this. You take your own pouch of gold dust to the market. The sheer variety of goods is intoxicating. You buy a silk scarf for a family member back home, a bag of unfamiliar spices, a beautifully crafted oil lamp. The merchant, seeing your Malian clothes, smiles warmly and names a price. You pay it without question. You feel wealthy, powerful, and generous. You have no idea that with every purchase, you are a tiny foot soldier in an army that is unintentionally waging war on the entire economic foundation of the Mediterranean world. At first, the effect of your caravan spending spree is euphoric. The merchants of Cairo are ecstatic. Their stalls are emptying out, and their coffers are filling with high-quality gold. There's a festive, boomtown atmosphere in the markets. Money is flowing, people are spending, and everyone seems to be getting rich. But after a few weeks, you start to notice things changing in subtle, then significant ways. You go back to the same merchant in the Khan el-Khalili to buy another silk scarf, identical to the first one. This time, the price he quotes is higher, not by a little, but by a lot. You have plenty of gold, so you pay it, but you leave feeling a little confused. A few days later, you go to buy a simple loaf of flatbread, a daily necessity. The price has gone up. The cost of dates, of oil, of everything, is creeping upwards. This is your ground-level view of an economic phenomenon that the city's scholars would soon be frantically trying to understand. Massive, runaway inflation. The problem is simple supply and demand, but on a city-wide scale. Mansa Musa has so saturated the market with gold that the value of gold itself has plummeted. There's just too much of it. It's not special anymore. So if gold is worth less, you need more of it to buy the same item. A merchant who used to sell a rug for 1 gold dinner now needs 2 or 3 to have the same purchasing power he had a month ago. Prices for goods and services across the entire city begin to skyrocket to compensate for the crashing value of the currency they are being paid in. It's a strange and frustrating experience. You feel incredibly wealthy, with a pouch full of gold dust, but that wealth buys you less and less each day. Your money is melting away in your hands, not literally, but in its value. The initial joy of spending gives way to a sense of unease. The consequences ripple outwards, affecting everyone. The wealthy Cairene nobles and merchants who had their fortunes stored in gold see the value of their savings evaporate. But the people who are hit hardest are the ones your king's charity was meant to help. The poor and the working class. A laborer whose daily wage was a fixed amount of silver or copper suddenly finds that his pay can no longer afford a loaf of bread for his family. The gold that was showered on the beggars is now worthless for buying the necessities that have become ruinously expensive. The city's complex economy, a finely tuned machine of prices and wages, has been thrown completely out of whack. By a fascinating, and frankly, quite nerdy historical tidbit is how we know about this with such precision. It's not just from storytellers. The Mamluk Sultanate was a highly bureaucratic state. They kept meticulous records. Economic historians have been able to study the recorded prices of staple goods like wheat and barley in Cairo from the years before, during, and after Mansa Musa's visit. The data shows a sharp, undeniable spike in prices that corresponds exactly with his stay, a spike that took years to level out. It's the medieval equivalent of having a spreadsheet that proves a single tourist crashed the stock market. The Cairene officials start to get nervous. This isn't a temporary fluctuation. It's a full-blown economic crisis. Their gold-based currency, the dinar, is becoming unstable. Trade with other regions becomes difficult. As foreign merchants are unwilling to accept a currency that is rapidly losing its value. The economic shockwave doesn't just affect Cairo. It begins to ripple across the Mediterranean. Genoese and Venetian merchants who trade in the port of Alexandria carry the news. And the devalued gold. Back to Europe. The golden pilgrimage of the King of Mali is no longer just a story of spectacle. It's a serious economic event with international consequences. There's a debate among historians about how aware Mansa Musa was of the chaos he was causing. Was he an innocent, whose pious generosity had unforeseen and disastrous consequences? Or was he, as some revisionist historians have suggested, aware of the power he wielded? Could this have been a deliberate act of economic warfare? A way to demonstrate the power of his empire by destabilizing the greatest power in the region? The overwhelming consensus is that his intentions were genuinely charitable. He came from an economy where gold was a resource to be distributed, not a sensitive commodity to be managed. He simply had no frame of reference for the complex, credit-based, and highly interconnected economy of Cairo. He was, in essence, economically illiterate in this new context. As your 3-month stay in Cairo draws to a close, the city is a different place. The initial awe has been replaced by a quiet economic panic. You came as celebrated guests, but you are leaving behind a city grappling with a financial crisis of your making. The golden touch of your king, it turns out, was a little too strong. It's time to leave Cairo. The air has changed. The initial, rapturous welcome has cooled into a strained politeness. You get the sense that the city, while impressed, is also quietly relieved to see you go. Your caravan reassembles, restocked and replenished, and turns its face toward the final leg of the sacred journey, the Sinai Peninsula, and beyond it, the holy cities of Arabia. This part of the journey feels different. The mood within the caravan is more somber, more focused. The spectacle of Cairo is behind you. Now, the true religious purpose of the Hajj comes to the forefront. The landscape, too, reinforces this shift. You enter the Sinai, a place of stark and mountainous beauty. It's a biblical landscape, a place of prophets and revelations. The chatter and bustle of the caravan seem to quiet down, replaced by a more contemplative silence. The journey becomes less of a royal procession and more of a genuine pilgrimage. You cross the Red Sea, another massive logistical undertaking of ferrying thousands of people and animals, and finally set foot in the Hijaz, the western region of Arabia. The air here feels ancient, charged with centuries of prayer. You are walking on sacred ground. The culmination of this year-long trek is your arrival in Mecca. For a devout Muslim like yourself and your king, this is the center of the world. It's the destination you have been walking towards for thousands of miles. As you approach the city, you, like all pilgrims, enter a state of iron, a state of ritual purity. You shed your fine, worldly clothes and don the simple pilgrim's garment, 2 pieces of seamless white cloth. In this moment, all distinctions of rank and wealth are meant to fall away. The king, the soldier, the merchant, you are all equal before God. Mansa Musa himself sheds his royal robes and golden cap for the simple white cloth. Seeing your king, the wealthiest man in the world, dressed as the humblest of pilgrims is a profoundly powerful sight. It's the ultimate expression of his piety, the very reason he started this journey. Here, his gold means nothing. His status is not that of a king, but of a simple pilgrim, one among thousands. You enter the city and make your way to the Grand Mosque, the Masjidul Haram. At its center stands the Kaaba, the simple, black, tube-shaped building that Muslims around the world turn to in prayer every day. The sight of it, after so long, is overwhelming. You join the massive, swirling tide of humanity, the Tawaf, circumambulating the Kaaba 7 times, your voice joining 1,000 others in a chorus of prayer. You perform the other rituals of the Hajj, the running between the hills of Safa and Marwa, the journey to the plain of Arafat for a day of prayer and contemplation, and the symbolic stoning of the devil at Mina. These are rituals that have been performed for centuries, connecting you to a vast community of believers across space and time. Even here, however, the man's reputation and wealth precede him. While he himself lives humbly during the rituals, his caravan's resources are once again put to use. He pays for the lodging and food of countless other Torah pilgrims he meets in the holy city. He again gives lavishly to the city as scholars unto the upkeep of its sacred sites. A little-known fact is that the holy cities of Mecca and Medina were, at this time, under the nominal protection and influence of the Mamluk Sultan in Cairo. So the man's generosity here was also a subtle diplomatic nod to his recent hosts, a continuation of the relationship he had built in Egypt. But something is different about the charity here. In Cairo, it felt like a performance, a statement. Here, in the crucible of the Hajj, it feels more personal, more deeply rooted in faith. There is a story, perhaps apocryphal but telling, that the Mansa was so moved by his experience that he spoke of not returning to Mali at all, of wishing to live out his days as a simple resident of the holy city. His advisors had to gently persuade him that his duty was to his empire and his people back home. Historians often focus on the economic impact of the Cairo stop, but they also debate the personal impact of the Hajj on Mansa Musa himself. Did the journey change him? Did this profound spiritual experience alter his perspective as a ruler? The evidence suggests it did. The man who had returned to Mali was not quite the same as the one who left. He was still a king of immense wealth, but he was now also a Haji, a person who had completed the pilgrimage, a title of great respect, and he was returning with new ideas, new ambitions for his empire that were not just about wealth, but about faith, knowledge, and culture. Having completed the sacred rites, the state of Ihram is lifted. You may once again wear your normal clothes. The Hajj is over. The journey's ultimate purpose has been fulfilled. Now, There is only one thing left to do. Tulung, Long Wakon. The journey back begins with a renewed sense of purpose. The Hajj is complete, the spiritual obligation fulfilled. The mood in the caravan is one of quiet satisfaction. But as you retrace your steps, heading back towards Cairo, a new kind of news begins to travel up the line, past from merchants and travelers heading in the opposite direction. It's news from the city you just left, and it isn't good. The rumors are confusing at first. Whispers of broken markets, of worthless gold. As you get closer to Egypt, the stories become clearer and more alarming. The river of gold your king unleashed upon Cairo didn't just cause a temporary splash. It caused a flood that swept away the city's economic foundations. The value of the gold dinar, your age old, had crashed by at least 20 to 25%, a catastrophic drop for a major currency. The inflation you witnessed starting before you left has spiraled out of control. Merchants who were once thrilled by your caravan's free spending habits are now facing ruin. The gold they eagerly accepted is now worth a fraction of its former value, while the price of the goods they need to import from other regions has skyrocketed. The entire system of credit and trade, which relied on a stable price for gold, is in chaos. The tales of your king's generosity are no longer told with awe, but with a kind of bitter resentment. He is the man who, with the best of intentions, broke their city. This information reaches Mansa Musa, and by all accounts, he is genuinely distressed. This was never his intention. His lavish spending was meant as an act of piety and a display of power, not as an act of economic sabotage. He came from a place where the king's role was to distribute wealth, to be the great provider. The idea that giving away too much money could be a bad thing was a concept entirely foreign to his economic worldview. The situation presents him with a bizarre and unprecedented problem. He is, in effect, being told that he has to fix the economy he accidentally crashed. He is about to re-enter a city where he is simultaneously a celebrated pilgrim and an economic pariah. This is a point where the historical accounts get particularly fascinating, showing a man forced to confront the consequences of his own fabulous wealth. He has to come up with a solution. He can't simply apologize. He needs to act. The damage was caused by putting too much gold into the system. The logical, the strange, solution is to somehow take it back out. One of the less dramatized but crucial parts of the story is the sheer cost of the return journey. The caravan had spent lavishly in Cairo and the holy cities. While you still have gold, your supplies of everything else are running low. You need to purchase vast amounts of food and equipment for the long trek across the Sahara. But now, you face a market where prices are absurdly inflated. The cost of your own return journey has been magnified by your own previous actions. It's a perfect storm of economic irony. There is a historical debate on the severity and duration of the crisis. Some contemporary Arab sources, perhaps prone to a bit of drama, paint a picture of utter, long-lasting collapse. Modern economic historians, while confirming the inflationary shock, suggest that a complex market like Cairo's would have had mechanisms to adapt over time. The decade of inflation often cited might be an overstatement, but the immediate crisis was undeniably severe. What is not in dispute is that for a period of several years, the name Mansa Musa was synonymous with economic chaos in Egypt. As you stand once again on the outskirts of Cairo, the mood is heavy. The triumphant entrance of a few months ago feels like a distant memory. This time, you are not here to put on a show. You are here to clean up a mess. The king who could command an army of thousands and a treasury of unimaginable size now faces a challenge that can't be solved with power or simple generosity. He has to become, for a brief and surreal moment, the central banker of Cairo. He needs to figure out how to make gold rare again. Re-entering Cairo is a strange, subdued affair. There are no cheering crowds, no grand procession. You are now faced with the very real, very expensive consequences of your earlier visit. The prices for grain, for animal fodder, for new water skins, everything the caravan needs to survive the return journey across the desert are astronomical. The gold that felt so limitless on the way here is now being spent at an alarming rate just on basic supplies. Mansa Musa, confronted with the economic chaos he inadvertently created, devises a plan. It is a piece of amateur, medieval-style monetary policy that is so audacious, it's almost brilliant. He decides to reverse the flow of gold. If the problem was that he put too much gold into the market, he would now take it out. He decides to borrow. He sends his financial advisors, the same men who manage the distribution of his wealth, back into the markets of Cairo. But this time, they are not giving gold away. They are asking for it. They approach the very same prominent merchants and moneylenders whom they had showered with gifts just a few months prior. The proposition is simple. Lend the Mansa of Mali your gold. This, as you can imagine, is a tough sell. You want to borrow the gold that you gave me, which is now worthless because you gave so much of it away. The merchants are skeptical, to say the least. To convince them, the Mansa has to do something extraordinary. He offers to borrow the gold at an exorbitant rate of interest. He effectively promises to pay back far more than he takes, making it an offer too good for the city-ass financiers to refuse. So begins one of the strangest scenes in economic history. The king, widely considered the richest man in the world, is going on a borrowing spree. His men go from stall to stall, from one merchant's house to another, collecting gold loans. They are, in effect, performing what a modern central bank would call an open market operation. They are buying up the excess money supply, in this case, gold, to reduce the amount in circulation and hopefully drive its value back up. It's a bizarre sight. You, a member of the caravan, might be tasked with accompanying one of the royal treasurers. You enter the shop of a spice merchant who, months ago, you saw gleefully accepting your gold. Now, he carefully weighs out that same gold, hands it over to your treasurer, and receives a written promise of future repayment at a high premium. This act is a source of considerable academic fascination. Did Mansa Musa truly understand the economic principles at play, or was he just acting instinctively? Most historians lean towards the latter. He likely didn't think in terms of monetary policy or inflationary pressures. He probably thought in more direct, personal terms. My actions have devalued the currency of my hosts. To be an honorable guest, I must restore its value. The way to make something valuable is to make it scarce. Therefore, I will gather it up. It was a simple, practical solution to a complex problem. One of the wonderfully weird, almost comical, details of this whole affair is that it worked, at least, partially, by borrowing so much gold. Mansa Musa did manage to create a temporary shortage. He single-handedly soaked up a huge amount of the excess liquidity in the Cairene market. The value of gold began to stabilize and even creep back up. The merchants who lent him the gold were happy, as they now held promissory notes for a future fortune. The Mansa was happy, as he had, in his eyes, restored his honor and fixed the problem. Of course, there's a catch. He now owed a colossal amount of debt to the merchants of Cairo. Whether he ever actually paid it back is a point of historical mystery. No records exist of a massive caravan of gold being sent from Mali to Cairo in the subsequent years to settle these debts. It's possible the loans were seen by the merchants as a kind of force tax, the price of doing business with such a powerful and unpredictable force. Or perhaps the Iowas were simply forgotten over time. It remains an unresolved historical loose end, as the caravan finally prepares to leave Cairo for the last time. It is in a much different state than when it arrived. The camels are still laden, but now they carry not just the remaining gold, but also a vast quantity of Egyptian goods, textiles, books, and scientific instruments and a portfolio of high-interest debt. Your king came to Cairo as a giver, and he leaves as a borrower. He has crashed an economy and then, through sheer force of will and a bizarre borrowing binge, he has partially uncrashed it. It's a messy, complicated, and utterly human end to his legendary stay in the city of 1,000 minarets. As your caravan finally turns its back on Cairo and plunges once more into the familiar silence of the Sahara, the immediate crisis might seem to be resolved. Mansa Musa has, through his strange borrowing scheme, managed to put a temporary patch on the economy he broke. But the true consequences of his visit were not so easily erased. He had fundamentally and permanently altered the economic landscape of the entire region. The inflation he caused didn't just disappear. While his borrowing might have stabilized the day-to-day price of gold in the Cairo souks, the sheer volume of new, high-quality gold that had been injected into the Mediterranean system had a lasting impact. Chroniclers writing more than a decade after the man's visit, like the scholar Al-Umarai, noted that the value of the gold dinar had never fully recovered. The Musa inflation, as we might call it, lingered for years, a long-term economic hangover from one king's epic party. For the average person in Egypt, this meant years of economic instability. Wages struggled to keep up with the fluctuating prices of essential goods. Long-term contracts and loans that were based on the old value of gold had to be renegotiated. The economic certainty that people relied upon was shaken. Your king's 3-month stay had created a decade of financial headaches for a whole nation. The ripples spread far beyond Egypt. The port of Alexandria was a major hub for European trade, especially for the powerful Italian maritime republics of Venice and Genoa. Their merchants, who did business in Alexandria, were directly exposed to the devalued gold. They carried this inflation back to Europe with them, along with incredible stories of the source of the disruption. The price of gold in European markets also dipped, albeit less dramatically than in Cairo. The economic world of the 14th century, it turns out, was more interconnected than you might think. A king's charity in Cairo could affect a banker's ledger in Florence. But the most significant long-term consequence was not just economic. It was psychological. It was about knowledge and perception. Before your journey, West Africa was, to the Mediterranean world, a land of myth, the mysterious Bil Ad al-Sudan, the land of the blacks, from which gold magically appeared. After your journey, it was a known entity. It had a name Mali and a face Mansa Musa. The myth was replaced by a concrete, and frankly, even more astonishing reality. A weird but crucial detail of this information transfer is the role of oral history. The story of the Golden Pilgrimage was not just written down by scholars. It was told and retold by merchants, travelers, and pilgrims in every caravanserai, port, and market from Morocco to Persia. The story became a legend, a benchmark for unbelievable wealth, for decades afterward. If a ruler or a merchant wanted to describe someone as fabulously rich, they would say, "He is as wealthy as the king of Mali." This newfound fame had very tangible effects. It dramatically increased the interest of European and Arab powers in the source of West African gold. Cartographers, mapmakers, and explorers were suddenly very keen to understand where exactly Mali was and how to get there. The desire to bypass the long and difficult trans-Saharan route and find a direct, sea-based route to the gold-producing regions of West Africa became a major driver of exploration. There's a fascinating, though debated, historical theory that links Mansa Musa's journey directly to the Age of Discovery. The argument goes like this. Musa's display of wealth put West Africa on the map as the undisputed land of gold. This, in turn, fueled the desire of maritime powers, particularly Portugal in the 15th century, to find a sea route around the Sahara to access this wealth directly. This quest for gold was one of the primary motivations for the Portuguese expeditions down the coast of Africa, which in turn paved the way for the voyages of Vasco da Gama to India and Columbus to the Americas. It's a long chain of events, and many historians would argue it's an oversimplification. But it's not an exaggeration to say that Mansa Musa's extravagant trip played a significant role in shaping European perceptions of Africa and whetting their appetite for its resources. As you trudge through the sand on your way home, you are completely unaware of these vast, slow-moving historical currents you've helped set in motion. You are just a weary traveler, happy to be heading home. You don't know that the stories of your journey will echo for centuries, that the gold you so freely spent will alter economies for a decade, and that the fame you brought to your empire will, in the long run, attract a new and more dangerous kind of attention. The decade of inflation was just the first, most obvious consequence of your king's journey. The deeper impacts would take much longer to unfold. While the economic fallout in Cairo was a messy and unintended consequence, The journey had another, far more positive and intentional outcome. You had set out to put Mali on the map, and in this, you succeeded beyond your wildest dreams. The most concrete evidence of this success wasn't written in an economic ledger, but drawn on parchment, in the workshops of the most skilled cartographers in the world. A few years after your return, a map is produced that will become one of the most famous and important documents of the medieval period. It is the Catalan Atlas, created in 1375 on the island of Majorca. A hub of Jewish and Christian map-making expertise, Majorca was a crossroads of information, where merchants, sailors, and travelers from all over the Mediterranean shared their knowledge. And the story they were all telling in the years after 1325 was the story of your pilgrimage. The Catalan Atlas is not a map in the modern, satellite-accurate sense. It's a rich, illustrated guide to the known world, filled with drawings of kings, trade routes, and strange beasts. And there, in the section representing West Africa, for the first time on a major European map, your king appears. He is depicted sitting on a throne, wearing a golden crown, and holding a massive golden nugget in his hand. He is not just a name. He is a figure of power and authority. The caption next to him reads, "This black lord is called Masmeli, Lord of the Blacks of Guinea. This king is the richest and most noble lord of all this region on account of the abundance of gold which is gathered in his land." This image is a monumental achievement in public relations. It's the visual proof that the stories were true. It cements the image of Mansa Musa in the European imagination as the king of gold. It's the medieval equivalent of getting a feature on the cover of Time magazine. Where did the cartographer, a man named Abraham Cresques, who likely never left his Mediterranean island, get such specific information? He got it from the network of merchants and travelers who had been in Cairo during your visit, or who had heard the stories secondhand. He learned the name of the king, the name of his empire, Mali, or Meli as it was written, and a key fact of his immense wealth. A fascinating little detail that map historians love is the representation of the cities. The atlas shows the capital of Mianai, and, more importantly, it marks the city of Timbuktu, which you are now on your way back to. Before your journey, Timbuktu was a relatively obscure trading post on the edge of the desert. After your journey, and especially because of what Mansa Musa does next, it will become legendary, synonymous with the idea of a remote, fabulously wealthy, unlearned city. The map is both a record of what was known and a catalyst for what would become famous, but the map also reveals the limits of European knowledge. While the depiction of the king and his gold is vivid, the geography of the interior of West Africa is vague and distorted. The rivers don't flow correctly, and the distances are wrong. The Europeans knew that the Golden King existed, but they still had only a hazy idea of the precise layout of his kingdom. This combination of concrete knowledge, there's a rich king there, and geographical mystery, we don't know exactly how to get to him, was a powerful lure for future explorers. There's an ongoing academic discussion about the directness of the information flow. Did the mapmakers get their information from a single, detailed traveler's account, or did they piece it together from dozens of fragmented sailors' tales and merchant rumors? The truth is likely a combination of both. The Catalan Atlas is a masterpiece of synthesis, a beautiful collage of all the information swirling around the Mediterranean about the lands beyond the Sahara. As you make your way home, you are carrying more than just Egyptian goods. You and your 60 Cairo fellow travelers are walking, talking sources of information. Every story you will tell back home, and every story that was told about you in Cairo, contributed to this grand project of filling in the blank spaces on the world's maps. You didn't just bring Mali's gold to the world. You brought the world's attention to Mali. You have redrawn the map, not with ink and parchment, but with the footsteps of your camels and the sheer, undeniable weight of your gold. The world now knows who you are, and, for better or worse, it will never forget. The return journey across the Sahara is a different experience from the outward-bound trek. You are seasoned now, weary but experienced desert travelers. The fear of the unknown has been replaced by the dull ache of longing for home. The mood is less about adventure and more about endurance. But your caravan is not returning empty-handed. In fact, you are bringing back a new kind of treasure, one that might prove to be more valuable and enduring than the gold you gave away. In Cairo and Mecca, your king did not just spend his gold on charity and lavish goods. He went on a recruitment tour. He had been deeply impressed by the architecture, the scholarship, and the sophisticated culture he had witnessed in Egypt and Arabia. He decided he didn't just want to visit it. He wanted to import it. He used his immense wealth and influence to persuade some of the brightest minds of the Islamic world to return with him to Mali. So as you walk, you are joined by new and fascinating traveling companions. There is a man named Abu Ishaq al-Sayshalai, a renowned poet and architect from Granada, the last Muslim kingdom in Spain, who had been living in Cairo. He is a man of culture and refinement, accustomed to the elegant courts of Andalusia and Egypt. Now, he is riding a camel through the middle of the desert, lured by the man's promises of unlimited resources to practice his craft. He is, in effect, the star architect that the Mansa has just signed to a massive contract. There are also scholars from the great Al-Azhar University, men learned in Islamic law, theology, and science. They are carrying precious cargo of their own, chests full of books, not just religious texts, but works on mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, and medicine, at a time when every book had to be painstakingly copied by hand. A library was a treasure of incalculable worth. Your caravan is a mobile library, transporting the accumulated knowledge of the Arab world across the Sahara. You also have engineers and administrators, men who understand the complex bureaucracy of the Mamluk state. Mansa Musa saw how efficiently the Mamluks managed their vast territories, and he wanted to bring that expertise back to his own empire. He is returning with not just ideas, but the people who know how to implement them. This reverse-brain drain is one of the most significant and often overlooked outcomes of the pilgrimage. While the story usually focuses on the gold going out, the intellectual capital coming in would shape the future of the Mali Empire for generations. One of the more peculiar, and perhaps less glamorous, acquisitions was in the field of public administration. The Mamluk state was famous for its complex system of titles and court ceremonies. Mansa Musa was so impressed by this that he essentially hired consultants to help him upgrade his own court. He wanted the pomp and circumstance he had seen in Cairo. This led to the introduction of new formal titles, new layers of bureaucracy, and more elaborate court rituals back in Nianai. Some might see this as an unnecessary imitation, but for a king looking to solidify his empire's standing on the world stage, adopting the international standard of royal protocol was a logical step. Of course, the journey back is hard on these new recruits. They are not accustomed to the rigors of the desert. The architects and scholars are likely far less comfortable than the soldiers and camel drivers who are in their element. You see them, huddled in their tents in the evenings, perhaps looking a little bewildered by their new circumstances, wondering if they made the right decision. Historians debate the scale of this recruitment. Was it a handful of key figures like al-Sayshalai, or was it a larger contingent of dozens, or even hundreds, of skilled professionals? The chronicles tend to focus on the big names, but it's likely that a whole support staff of assistants, scribes, and craftsmen came along with them. As you finally leave the desert behind and enter the familiar, welcoming savanna of your homeland, you are part of a very different caravan. The gold in your coffers is significantly depleted. The number of travelers has likely dwindled due to the hardships of the journey, but your ranks have been swelled by a new kind of wealth. You are bringing home not just gold, but knowledge. Not just souvenirs, but scholars. The gold you left in Cairo caused a temporary economic crisis. The knowledge you are bringing back to Mali will build a legacy that will last for centuries. Your journey doesn't end when you reach the borders of the Mali Empire. There is one last stop, a city that was, before you left, a significant but secondary trading post. Now, with the new vision your king has brought back from his travels, it is destined to become the jewel of the empire. You arrive at the city of Timbuktu, located strategically on the southern edge of the Sahara, where the Niger River bends northward. Timbuktu was perfectly positioned to be the meeting point for the salt caravans from the north and the golden grain from the south. But Mansa Musa now saw it as something more than just a marketplace. He envisioned it as a center of learning, faith, and culture of West African Cairo, a beacon of Islamic civilization in the heart of his empire. And he has brought the men and the money to make it happen. The first and most visible sign of this transformation is in architecture. The Mansa commissions his star architect, Abu Ishaq al-Seychulai, to build a new grand mosque, the Jing-Yui Rebbe Mosque. El-Seychulai, accustomed to the stone and marble of Granada and Cairo, is now faced with a new challenge. The primary building material of the Sahara is mud brick and timber. What emerges is a masterpiece of architectural fusion. Al-Seychulai combines the traditional Malian building techniques with the aesthetic principles and structural knowledge he brought from abroad. He introduces new techniques, like the use of burnt brick for key structural elements, and a more complex, pyramidal minaret design. The result is a uniquely Sahelian style of Islamic architecture, grand and monumental, yet perfectly suited to its environment. The Jing-Yui Rebbe Mosque, which still stands today, though it has been rebuilt and restored many times, becomes the model for religious architecture throughout the region. But the transformation is more than just brick and mud. The scholars and jurists you brought back from Cairo form the nucleus of a new intellectual community. Mansa Musa funds the establishment of schools and, most importantly, a university, the Sankore University. It was a university in the modern sense, with a central campus and formal degrees. It was a collection of independent schools, each run by a master scholar, centered around the city's main mosques. Students would study under a particular teacher, and when they had mastered the texts, they would be granted a certificate, their own license to teach. The curriculum was based on the classical Islamic sciences, Quranic studies, theology, and Maliki law, but it also included rhetoric, astronomy, mathematics, and history. The books you carried across the desert become the foundation of its great libraries. Timbuktu quickly earns a reputation throughout the Islamic world as a city of scholars, the city of 333 saints, as it would later be known. Students and teachers from across North Africa and the Middle East travel there to study and teach. A wonderfully specific, almost nerdy detail that highlights the city's booked raid comes from the writings of the later traveler Leo Africanus. He visited Timbuktu in the early 16th century, long after Mansa Musa's time, but at the height of the city's intellectual fame. He noted that the most profitable business in the city was not in gold or salt, but in books. Manuscripts imported from North Africa fetched a higher price than any other commodity. This demonstrates the enduring success of Musa's project. He had transformed a trade post into a book town. Of course, this transformation wasn't instantaneous. It was a project that spanned the rest of the Mansa's reign, and it wasn't without its challenges. There is an ongoing scholarly discussion about the extent to which this new, formal, Arabic-based scholarship integrated with or displaced the existing oral traditions of the empire, represented by the griots. The two systems of knowledge likely coexisted, sometimes uneasily, representing the dual nature of the empire itself deeply rooted in West African tradition, yet aspiring to be a major player in the global Islamic world. You watch as the city changes before your eyes. New buildings rise from the sand. The marketplace bustles not just with traders, but with students debating points of law. The call to prayer from the new minaret of the Jing-Yui Rebbe Mosque echoes across a city that is becoming the intellectual and spiritual capital of a vast empire. The gold that was spent in Cairo bought fame. The gold that was invested in Timbuktu bought a legacy. Mansa Musa was building his own Cairo on the banks of the Niger, ensuring that the wealth of his empire was reflected not just in what it could spend, but in what it could create. The years after your return pass in a rhythm of peaceful prosperity. The empire is at its zenith. Timbuktu has blossomed into the city your king dreamed it would be, its libraries and mosques bustling with life. You are older now, your memories of the great journey softened by time, like a stone smoothed by a river. The hardships, the thirst, the exhaustion, The blisters on your feet have faded, leaving behind the warm glow of having been part of something truly great. One afternoon, you are sitting in the shade of the Timbuktu, now a sprawling, cosmopolitan hub. A merchant caravan has recently arrived from the north, bringing with it goods from as far away as Venice and Damascus. You overhear a traveler, a man with the sharp features and sun-weathered skin of someone who has spent his life on the Mediterranean, telling a story to a rapt audience of local traders. And the story he is telling is your story, but it's not. He speaks of the great pilgrimage of the King of Mali, but in his telling, the facts have been polished into a brilliant, unbelievable legend. He says the man's caravan was 500,000 men strong, an army so vast it drank rivers dry. He claims that every one of the king's soldiers carried a solid gold shield and that the king himself rode a horse shod with golden horseshoes, replacing them every time one fell off, leaving a trail of gold across the Sahara for others to find. You almost laugh out loud. You remember the careful rationing of water, the disciplined but practically equipped soldiers, and the sturdy, but very much flesh and bone, horses. The storyteller goes on, his voice rising with dramatic flair. He says that when Mansa Musa entered Cairo, he had the streets paved with gold bricks for his procession and that the light reflecting off his wealth was so bright it blinded the Sultan. This is the myth. This is what your journey has become in the mouths of strangers. It's been stripped of its nuance, its logistics, its humanity. It has been transformed into a fairy tale. The complex, pious, and politically shrewd man you knew as your king has become a caricature, a simple avatar of wealth, a king with a Midas touch, the incredible, real-life feat of moving 60 Zorro people across a continent has been deemed not amazing enough, so the numbers have been inflated to impossible proportions. Then the storyteller says something truly strange. He mentions that some wise men in his homeland believe this king of gold might be related to another lost king they've been searching for, a mythical Christian ruler named Prester John. For centuries, Europeans have been captivated by the legend of Prester John, a powerful Christian monarch living somewhere in the east, an ally they hope to find to help in their crusades. Hearing your devout Muslim king being mixed up in this Christian legend is utterly bizarre. It's a perfect example of how stories, when they travel far enough, get tangled and merged, creating new, hybrid myths that serve the hopes and dreams of the people telling them. This brings you to the most profound legacy of your journey. The myth, as exaggerated and inaccurate as it is, has had a very real and powerful effect on the world. The storyteller speaks of this himself. He says that in the port cities of Europe, kings and princes are funding new expeditions. They are building stronger ships, designed to sail in the open ocean. Their goal, to bypass the long desert routes and find a way to sail directly to the land of this golden king. They want to find the source. And here lies a question that historians still get into heated arguments about. How responsible was your journey for kicking off the European age of discovery? One school of thought argues that it was a direct and primary cause. The legend of Mansa Musa's wealth was so potent, so alluring, that it created an unstoppable gold rush, sending explorers like the Portuguese charging their way down the African coast. In this version of history, your king is a central character in the story of global exploration. But other historians are more skeptical. They argue that while the myth of your king's wealth was a compelling story, it was just one factor among many. They point to the growing power of the Ottoman Empire, which was making land-based trade with the East more difficult, the European demand for spices, and crucial advancements in shipbuilding and navigation. In this view, the Europeans were going to start exploring anyway, and the story of Mansa Musa was simply a convenient and powerful piece of propaganda to justify the immense cost and risk of these voyages. You, sitting in the market, know nothing of these future debates. You only know what you see and hear. The story of your journey has taken on a life of its own. It no longer belongs to you or the 60 Zorro people who walked that path. It belongs to the world now, a glittering legend that is inspiring both wonder and greed. You take a quiet sip of water and smile. The world can have its fairy tale of golden streets, You have the memory of the sand. The years continue to spool out, measured in the steady rhythm of the seasons and the arrival of caravans. Mansa Musa rules for a total of about 25 years, and the period following his return from Mecca is remembered as the golden age of the Mali Empire. The seeds of knowledge he planted in Timbuktu have grown into a forest. The empire is stable, prosperous, and respected throughout the known world. You are living in the empire's long, one golden afternoon. The administrative reforms he brought back have been implemented. The royal court in Niamey is a more complex and formal affair now, with a host of new titles and ceremonies that mimic what the Mansa saw in Cairo. This bureaucracy, while perhaps a bit cumbersome, helps to more effectively manage the vast and diverse territories of the empire, from the coastal rainforests in the south to the desert sedge in the north. Tribute and taxes flow into the capital with a new regularity, funding the grand building projects and the patronage of scholars. The architectural style pioneered by El-Sechali has spread. New mosques, schools, and public buildings in the distinctive Sahelian style are constructed in other major cities of the empire. Like Gowanjin, it's a visible stamp of the Mansa's influence, a unified imperial style that reinforces a sense of common identity across a huge area. But as you enjoy this long period of peace and prosperity, you begin to notice subtle signs that all is not perfect. The empire, for all its wealth and power, has an inherent weakness. Its strength is almost entirely concentrated in the person of the Mansa. He is the central hub around which everything revolves. His authority is absolute, his decisions unquestioned. This is a powerful system when the ruler is as capable and visionary as Mansa Musa. But what happens when he is gone? You see it in the way the provincial governors, the Far Bas, behave. They are utterly loyal to Mansa Musa, but there are whispers of rivalries among them, jostling for favor and influence at court. The vast wealth of the empire, while a source of strength, also creates intense competition. Who will control the trade routes? Who will govern the richest provinces? These questions are kept in check by the sheer force of the Mansa's personality and authority. But the underlying tensions remain, both fascinating and somewhat sad. Cold fact from this period relates to the succession. Mansa Musa had a son, Magam, who would succeed him. However, the historical chronicles suggest that Mag did not possess his father's skill or vision. He was more interested in the pleasures of the court than the hard work of governance. Musa also had a brother, Suleiman, who was a much more capable administrator. This set the stage for future conflict. The principle of hereditary succession, father to son, was not as firmly established in Mali as it was in Europe. Power could just as easily pass to a powerful brother or uncle. This ambiguity over who had the rightful claim to the throne was a ticking time bomb at the heart of the empire. Historians are still debating the long-term stability of the Mali Empire's political structure. Was it a robust, institutionalized state, or was it a charismatic empire, held together primarily by the personal authority of a few great leaders? The evidence seems to point more towards the latter. It was an empire that produced incredible wealth and cultural achievements under strong rulers, but it lacked the deep institutional roots to withstand long periods of weak or contested leadership. As Mansa Musa ages, you can feel a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The golden afternoon is beginning to fade. The shadows are getting longer. The question of what comes next hangs unspoken in the air. The empire that Mansa Musa built was grander and more famous than ever before, but its very grandness made it a more tempting prize for ambitious governors' unrivaled dynasties. The fame he brought to Mali, the fame that put it on the Catalan Atlas, also meant that its internal politics were now of interest to outside powers, who might be tempted to meddle in succession disputes to their own advantage. Your great king has given you an era of unparalleled peace and prestige. He has built cities of knowledge and put your homeland on the world stage. But in doing so, he has also created a legacy that will be incredibly difficult for any successor to live up to. The very height of the empire's golden age contains the seeds of its eventual slow decline. You enjoy the warmth of the sun while it lasts, knowing, as people do when an era is ending, that the night will eventually come. Mansa Musa dies in the year 1337. There is no grand announcement that reaches the far corners of the world, only a quiet transition of power. His son, Naganoi, takes the throne, and as you feared, the solid gold foundation of the empire begins to show cracks. Magan is not his father. The charisma, the vision, the unifying force is gone. The empire doesn't collapse overnight. It is too large, too wealthy for that. But a slow, inexorable decline begins. The golden afternoon has ended, and the long twilight has begun. So now, as you sit in the quiet of your own evening, decades after that great journey, you are left to ponder the ultimate question. What did it all mean? What is the final entry on the ledger of the richest man who ever lived? His most tangible legacy is etched into the landscape of his homeland. The great Jingyue Reba Mosque still stands, its earthen minaret pointing to the heavens. The libraries of Timbuktu, though their collections would be scattered by future conquests, established a tradition of scholarship that endured for centuries. He proved that wealth could be transformed into something more lasting. Culture, faith, and knowledge. The economic chaos he caused in Cairo was a temporary storm that eventually passed. The intellectual renaissance he sparked in Timbuktu was a gentle rain that nourished the ground for generations. And then there is the title, the one that echoes through history, the richest man of all time. It's a claim that modern economists and historians find both impossible to verify and impossible to refute. His wealth wasn't a number in a bank account that can be adjusted for inflation. It was a function of his absolute control over the world's most valuable commodity. At a time when gold was the ultimate measure of wealth, he controlled more than half of the world's supply. His fortune wasn't just large. It was so vast that it broke the economies of other nations simply by being spent. It's a level of wealth that is, in the truest sense of the word, incomprehensible. This very incomprehensibility is, perhaps, the most peculiar and enduring part of his financial legacy. We can calculate the net worth of modern billionaires, but Mansa Musa's wealth defies calculation. It's like trying to measure the value of the sun. He represents a kind of wealth that no longer exists, not just owning a lot of money, but owning the source of money itself. But this brings us to the final, great debate among those who study the past, a question they argue about in quiet university offices. What was the true price of his fame? Was Mansa Musa the great builder, the wise king who put his empire on the world stage and ushered in a golden age? Or was he, unintentionally, the man who doomed it? By announcing his empire's wealth so loudly, did he paint a giant, glittering target on its back? Did the legend he created, the myth of an endless supply of gold, eventually lure the Portuguese, and later other European powers, to the shores of West Africa, setting in motion a chain of events that would lead to colonialism and the exploitation he could never have foreseen? Was it better to be rich and unknown, or to be famous and vulnerable? There is no easy answer. The chronicles don't give us one. History is not a simple morality play. It is a complex and often tragic story of unintended consequences. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps the truest legacy of Mansa Musa is not in the gold, the mosques, or the mechs. Perhaps it is in the journey itself, in the quiet courage of 60 Sahara people walking into the unknown, in the simple, human desire to fulfill a sacred duty, to see the world, and to show the world who you are. He set out to complete a pilgrimage and, in the process, became a permanent legend. He showed the world the wealth of Mali, but the journey also revealed the wealth of human ambition, faith, and the enduring power of a story well told, and that is a treasure that can never be spent. The embers of our story are beginning to cool now, glowing with a soft, residual warmth. The grand caravan has reached its final destination, its thousands of travelers dissolving into the quiet landscape of history. The voice of the storyteller in the market has faded, replaced by the gentle hum of the night, a sound that has no beginning and no end. You can feel the weight of your journey, the thousands of miles walked, settling comfortably into your limbs as you lie in the stillness of your room. The name's Mansa Musa, Neonai, Timbuktu, Cairo are no longer just historical facts. They are becoming places in your dreamscape. Their sun-baked walls and glittering markets built now from the soft, pliable material of your own imagination. The scent of desert dust and distant spices lingers for a moment, a faint perfume on the edge of sleep. You are drifting now, on a slow, wide river, much like the Niger, moving gently toward a quiet sea. There is no need to listen closely anymore. The tale is told. The day is done. Let the current carry you. Let the soft rhythm of your own breathing be the only drumbeat you follow into the deep and peaceful lands of slumber. The end of the article. Good night.